Hi, my name is Sasha Verrier, and welcome to the artist-friendly Blender Crash Course. Together, we will cover navigation, modeling, modifiers, UVs, materials, smoothing, retopology, and rendering. In this first part, we will cover the basic navigation. Blender is very much shortcut-oriented, so at all points, you will be able to see the shortcuts I'm using in the bottom left corner. I will do my best to also verbally name each new shortcut we encounter. So let's get started with basic navigation. In Blender, you can pan with Shift and middle mouse. You can move that way. You can also orbit by clicking the middle mouse button. You can obviously zoom with the mouse wheel. You can also smoothly zoom in with Control and middle mouse. As you can see, you can smoothly move that way. Then we will get on with selection, basic selection. So you can select an object with the left click and it becomes orange. You can select multiple objects with shift click. As you can see, the last object you select is bright orange compared to the dark orange you have there. This will be relevant later. You can also box select by just box selecting anywhere on the screen. You can shift click to add some stuff there too. You can also click anywhere to deselect everything. If you want to select everything, you can also press A like all, and then you have everything selected. Then you can also recenter the camera with the dot button on the numpad. This allows you to reset the zoom level, especially in case you have like very small objects. Let's take this object for instance. At one point it becomes very hard to orbit around it. If you press dot on the numpad, you can just rotate around this object and zoom level resets to this one. Then we can also snap the view to front, left, top, and bottom view. There's a couple ways to do this. Either you get close to the view and then press Alt, and then it snaps. Then you release the middle mouse button, and then you have front orthographic, which is written there. You can do it that way. It takes a bit of practice to not release the Alt button first, but once you get it, it's pretty useful. You can also just press there and have the top view, front view, right view, bottom view. This also works. You can also press the 7, 9, 1, or 3 button on which are the corners of the key, the numpad, to have the top view, bottom view, right view. If you press 5 on the numpad, at the center of the numpad, you can also switch from orthographic to perspective. Personally, I prefer to use the Alt method, so I can just snap very easily to a top view or a side view. You can also activate wireframe mode with Shift Z, and then you get access to wireframe mode. There's a couple different wireframe modes. You can also press Alt Z, Alt Z, and then you have like a semi-transparent wireframe. If you press Alt Z during the wireframe mode, you can also have this mode. Personally, I prefer to use this one, the Shift Z one, that you can also access by pressing Z and switching to wireframe mode, or going to the top right and just switching there to the different rendering modes. Let's get back to studio mode, solid mode, sorry, which is the default one you have on Blender. If you want to have a quad view, you can also press Ctrl-Alt-Q, and then you have a quad view. You can press it again to get back to standard view. That's it for basic navigation. And And now let's do translation. So there's a couple actions you can do in Blender. As I said, it's very much shortcut oriented. So in other softwares, you're more used to having those sort of gizmo and moving those. I highly recommend not to do that and use the Blender way, which is much faster and doesn't require you to have to grab a precise handle. So let me demonstrate. If you want to move the cube, we're going to use our first translation operation, which is G. It's a bit weird because M is on our side of the keyboard, so yeah, they use G. Let's remember it by saying G is for grab. So if I press G, then you can move there. You can move the cube any place. If you want to confirm, you left click. If you want to cancel, you right click. So this is good, but this is not really useful if you want to do precise movements. For instance, if you want to move on the x-axis, well, then you press J once, and then you press X to lock on the x-axis, or Y to lock on the y-axis, or Z to lock on the z-axis. If you want to lock on two axes at the same time, for instance, X and Y, then you press J to move, and then you press Shift Z to lock it on the axis perpendicular to Z, so X and Y. If you want to move it on the other axis, you can press Shift Y and then it locks on those axes, or Shift X to lock on those axes. Any action you do in Blender, well, pretty much, yeah, close to every action you do in Blender, pops a little menu on the top, on the bottom left. You can open this and then change the last action. For instance, if I wanted to move some other metric, like 7 meters, I can just go back on the last action. If you click somewhere, it disappears, but you can still press F9 to make it pop again and go back to the last action. When you do a movement, for instance, if I want to move this box 5 units in that direction, well then I press J, Y, and I can type 5 and enter. And then I've moved my cube 5 meters to the right. Those axis lock also work for rotation. So if I rotate, I can choose which axis to lock onto, and then I can also type, for instance, 45. So I can rotate my cube 45 degrees. As you can see, the action was rotate 45 degrees. One useful thing too, if I want to move this cube in that direction, when I move, if I press Z, it's going to lock on the global Z. If I press Z again, well, yeah, okay. If I press Y, sorry, then I can move the cube along the local Y axis. This is really useful if you have anything that is rotated. You can also press double R to orbit the object for more organic placement. And then the scale. The scale is pretty much the same logic as the move and the rotate. You can scale, you can also lock in the local axis by pressing the axis twice. And there you go. This allows you to scale the objects. One thing to note, if you go in item there, you have access to the scale of the object. This can be, having a non-uniform scale there can be a bit tricky for some modifiers. So if you want to apply this, which is the equivalent of a reset XForm or reset transform in either Maya or 3ds Max, you can press Ctrl A, scale, and this makes this object the new 111 versions there. You can also apply rotation or location. If you apply location, it's going to reset the pivot to 0, 0, 0. Same for rotation. This is the new 0. So if you move in a local axis, you see it doesn't follow the object anymore. Once we have basic navigation locked down, you can also, when you move something, you can press Shift to go more slowly or Control to move along the grid in increments. Then we'll see how to add an object. So with Shift A, like add, you can press there Shift A and add any objects you want. There's meshes, there's curves. We will see the most useful ones very soon. So I can add, for instance, Suzanne, which is the basic Blender object, like the teapot in 3ds Max. I can duplicate objects with Shift D. So this is a duplicate. I can also duplicate with Alt D. So if I open there, you see it's linked is not ticked on. If I pressed Alt D, now it's ticked on. So if I do any changes, and we will get to edit mode just after this, you can see those two are linked. And that is it for basic navigation in object mode. We'll do in the next video the edit mode.